and I think it's a great episode around the meme you sent me. So
Right, exactly. Yeah. All right, so let's get started. Hey, SaaS builders, welcome back to Excuse My SaaS, the podcast where we talk about how B2B tech products are turned into valuable businesses. Powered by ProdCamp, your revenue-centric user feedback platform, today's episode is a great opportunity to explore how podcasting can become a powerful tool for your business venture in 2025. Along the way, we'll also tackle some common myths about podcasting, like whether it's really as hard as people say to grow an audience, or is it the right medium for attracting new customers? So why this topic now? Well, the podcast industry saw a massive surge during the pandemic, over 1 million new podcasts launched in 2020, for instance. Recent data from Listen Notes on Podcast Index show that the rate of new podcast launches has slowed. On the other hand, the medium itself is far from declining. Apple Podcasts now hosts close to 100 million episodes, and that's still up 44% since 2021. So our today guest, Amir Rezaei, is a product manager and now the host of the Product Founder podcast, which has already hit 15 episodes. His journey includes product and engineering roles in tech, but the reason we're talking today is that Amir has recently entered the world of podcasting to create a space for SaaS founders to share insight and strategies for growth, similar to what we're doing here with Excuse My SaaS. So it was a great occasion, and today we'll explore the lesson he learned so far and his insight on leveraging podcast as part of a content strategy. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to ProdCamp YouTube channel, follow us on LinkedIn, and share this episode with anyone who would find it valuable. Welcome to the show. Let's get started.
thank you so much, Matei. I think it's a great intro. Super excited to be on this podcast episode.
Great to have you here. And we're here to talk about podcasts. So you've been part of the podcasting wave as first a listener and now as a host. And while the space of new podcast launches has slowed, podcast episode production is accelerating and the number of listeners keep growing. So are we in a golden age of podcasting, or is this landscape becoming tougher for new creators? What's your take?
So I was just reading an article and it was mentioned like around early 2000, everyone wanted to start startups. Then 2010, around that era, everyone wanted to become a YouTuber up until like 2015. And then 17, 18, 19, everyone wanted to become a TikToker. And then now everyone wants to become a podcaster. So we can always see this kind of like trend as we go further. I'm just also curious what's going to be the next one. Are we in the golden era? I think we are. And we are actually, I believe we are close to the peak. So it's so easy to start a podcast, but it's so hard to continue working on a podcast. I think for me, I did a really well market research about my topic, about podcasting, watched so many also YouTube videos and stuff like around how to create your podcast and everything like that. And everyone would say like, first of all, your first episode is not going to be good. That is true. No one is going to listen to the first, I would say even 10 episodes. That's also true. But then what we need to understand is the competition is so hard. Like everyone is starting a podcast and some people have great guests, some people have great production, great like budget. How are you going to fit into someone else's like listening schedule? I don't know how many podcasts do you listen per week. I personally do maybe 1 or 2. That's it. So like why should I change the guy who I've been listening since like forever and I love whatever he's talking about to some random guy who started like recently, which is like friend of mine or something. So we got to kind of understand that that's the like we got to reverse engineer and think about us, like how do I behave as a consumer to the podcast? And so when I started my own podcast, what should I be expecting, right? But at the same time, what happens is there's a lot of these metrics. So your number of downloads, the viewership, and then you do it like you put so much effort, and then you release the first episode, 5 views. You release the next one, like 40, and then you're so questioning, am I that bad? But you're not. but it's actually very, very competitive. So what I would say is, again, going back to that, we are in a very important era, and why I find podcasting incredibly powerful and unique is it's a very intimate thing. Like, imagine people are listening to our conversation for an hour, 30 minutes. So it's also very much unscripted. A lot of the podcasts are unscripted, and that's what people start to really enjoy, because they can follow and see what Matei or what Amir wants to talk about, what are his thoughts. Now, that being said, I also have another perspective on why we're in the golden era. If we look at the current political climate around the world, with Trump recently being elected, one of his strategy was going to as many as podcasts as possible, which was very interesting because, first of all, each of these podcasts were very different perspective. So Joe Rogan has his own perspective. PBD has his own perspective talking to Trump. Let's say Theo One has another perspective. And when Trump was going to all of these, and obviously like each of these have their own audience, the audience was expecting like Joe Rogan would start to ask questions in Joe Rogan format, right? So this was one of the way that he as an individual could sit and talk, not a speech, what he's saying in the rallies, but like an hour or 2 hour of like actually unscripted conversation. And there's a lot of data that shows that he got a lot of the votes from that and changed people's opinion about it, which his competitor didn't do that, right? So for me, I feel like after that, after Trump going to a lot of the podcasts and then him winning, I personally feel like there was like a big jump in the number of podcasts that we had. Like suddenly everyone was like, why I'm not doing my podcast, right? Like, and now I have a phone, I can buy like a Shure mic, it's gonna be 300, let me start it. And then we had like a sudden like jump in terms of like the number of podcasts being created. So that being said, so I don't know if you want to ask me a question or just
I
continue.
love the angle you take. I think it's also a moment where people start to understand more and more the power of the podcast as a media, and it's I won't say replacing standard media. It's becoming more and more a real channel that you can leverage for a political standpoint,
I think
but
it
not
has
only.
replaced the real media. Like, I don't know about you. I think I will just say about myself, I don't watch any news. I don't read any news. Where I get my news is from my social media, and not even through like BBC or Forbes and things like that. I just go and then see what my like let's say the influencer that I follow, which are again these podcast guys, what they're talking about. From their perspective, it starts to build my perspective. So that's kind of where we are getting the news. And the mainstream media used to be super powerful, but day by day it is becoming
The other thing,
weaker and weaker.
I would say that I still have a mixed manner of educating or bringing knowledge and information, where I still follow some of the mainstream media, but not through television, for instance. That's for sure. I'm not watching TV or news on TV anymore, and I don't know if I think it's the number of people doing that is probably decreasing, and that's where also podcast is coming to take the lead. So that's really interesting. So with 6 months of the product founder podcast under your belt, like maybe you can tell us what inspired you to start this journey. What's your goal, and maybe also what has surprised you most so far.
Yeah, so I used to go to a lot of events, even now today as well. And I always have good conversation with people in the events. And I was thinking like, these conversations, especially around product, these are great questions. Like I could share that with other people. And what I find also in terms of like product world, there's shiny like a shiny front end, which everyone is like this perfect thing, this great, without any flaw, which is called product management, and product managers are building product without any flaws, and they're so good at what they're doing. And then this creates, I believe, like imposter syndrome, because you think you're not good enough, you're not doing the best, blah, blah, blah. So, but I knew there is something behind it, which is just not being shown. And I wanted to spread that message. Like, hey guys, if we talk in an unscripted way, behind every company, every product, there are these mistakes. These are these thoughts going through it. Like even like the biggest product director in a big company, they also do mistakes. They also go through these thoughts, right? They also have imposter syndrome. So I wanted to
they're
kind of like,
doubting as well.
exactly. And you don't always know what's going to work, right? So you build features as well. You're going to be very influenced from different area. So that was, I would say, my biggest motivational factor, to just have good conversation, unscripted conversation with a lot of great folks. And it has been absolutely great experience for me so far. I was not really thinking of, I would say, how hard and how easy it would be to talk with people, because it is hard in a way to go and convince them to come to your podcast and stuff like that. But after a certain period of time, it becomes also a little bit easy, and you can reach out to the person and say like, hey, I have a podcast. I would like to have a talk with you for like an hour or something. And they will gladly join your podcast. Again, it's hard in the beginning. And then the bigger the guest is, the more difficult. And then the more, I would say, you need to really try to um, play your cards well and build up over a period of time. But then it's amazing that you can really sit down with like someone who's super experienced and just pick their brain, for an hour.
Right. Yeah.
So this is great.
And so anything that surprised you, or it was really unexpected from this experience?
Not really surprised, but it was not really surprised, but it did challenge me, the level of discipline you gotta have for podcasting.
Right.
So
Yeah.
imagine, I mean, I'm sure you know this now by now, but imagine you start Monday. This is you record this session, you edit it throughout the whole week, and everything about thumbnail, short clips, the pod itself. And then let's say you post it next Monday. And the next Monday you're recording again. And then you keep repeating this. And then the more you repeat this, the closer you get to you actually getting listener, to people actually like paying attention to you. You actually becoming even a little bit known in the podcast industry. So for me, I see, when I wanted to start it, I knew I'm not gonna really like see results in 6 months. That's literally what I had in my mind. I was thinking, what is one thing I can start right now, which will give me results in couple years? Like what would be that in terms of like like connections, in terms of like having the audience, and podcasting for me was one of them. So for the folks listening, if you really want to like, let's say, get a client within the next 6 months or something like that, I would highly encourage you to not start a podcast.
Right, exactly.
Really
So that's great. That's a good transition. About a recent article I read that Jay Klaus, who is the founder of Creator Science. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and so he suggests that exactly podcasts work best in the middle or bottom of a content funnel. When you think about a marketing content funnel, it's about so deepening relationships, you maybe building trust, building credibility. So I was curious to understand, how does your podcast fit into something that could be a broader content ecosystem, and what role does it play in exactly building connection with your audience?
Yeah. So I would just have an example myself. I watch so many short clips on YouTube, and there's so many podcast short clips that I see, and I know the guys, but I have never even listened to one of their episodes. Like they have been doing like 300-400 episodes, like a couple years in. I haven't listened to that guy. I don't have time to, again, like put that into my listening schedule. But the short clips are very powerful. So from the podcast, you can create short clips. But my suggestion would be you can just create short clips, so instead of going through all this like hard journey, just for a lot of people who wants to start, they go on LinkedIn and go on TikTok, just try to create short clips. Just test out if you can actually like create 12, 20, 30 clips. If you could do that like really consistently, then come back and say, okay, I want to start a podcast. Don't just start a podcast, because there's a lot of also metrics around that 90 or 99% of the podcasts don't make it till episode 10. That is the truth. That is the truth.
Yeah.
And a lot of the podcasts die within the first 3 to 6 months. They release great episodes once per week, and then they die. Like,
right.
Because it's, as I said, it's very hard to keep that discipline and just constantly repeat the same thing and you don't get any results.
Right. And the reason is to keep a rhythm of one episode per week, like you just said now. This is really intense. I've been myself trying to do it at the very beginning. We also understood that this was not sustainable for us, considering everything else we had to do at ProdCamp. So we had to go down to 2 episodes per month just to be able to keep quality up, build a good episode. So that makes a lot of sense.
Also, you need a team.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's easier when you have a team. Yeah.
No, I think you need a team, especially if you're doing video podcasts. You want to do shorts. You want everything to be posted in the right time in like 2-3 different socials. Like you need a team. Right now, Product Founder is a team of 5. So if you want to do like short clips, you just need to hire an editor who would do a couple of your short clips, and they will charge a certain amount of money. So it's so much easier.
Yeah, I see. Oh wow! So that's how you get to also the type of quality you get on your podcast, because you're working a lot on the post production as well. So that's require time and resources. I get it. So talking about getting a podcast started, building a podcast audience is often said to be one of the hardest thing in content creation. What's your experience? Can you tell us what approaches have worked for you, maybe to attract and retain listeners in such a crowded space? Did you find some tricks, some secret sauce that you can share, or is there just work and consistency, and that's pretty much it?
I think it's really the work and consistency. I like to have like a magic trick or something that suddenly you get all these listeners, but you really have to be consistent. Like you have to build a habit for yourself and also for your audience that like every Tuesday or Wednesday I'm going to be available. Everyone has their own way. I know there was like a guy I saw, he does podcasts, which is like a 10-minute podcast.
Yeah.
2 times per month, which is strange a little bit for me. It sounds more like a clip than a podcast, but he has been doing it for like a year. So he gives a reason to his audience that they can add him to their schedule, because it's just like 2 times per month and 10 minutes, and it's just 20 minutes, right?
All right, yeah.
Short clips is good because short clips creates that it's like the top of the funnel. It creates awareness around your podcast. Like, this podcast exists. This is the guy who he's talking all the time. And then later down the funnel is like where one guy hopefully comes and listens to your podcast. And then next time, hopefully that person actually returns and listens to another episode of yours. So, again, I think it's something that it will take a very long time to
build up. Yeah. In the article I was referring to earlier, they also mentioned that the best way to gain new listeners is through collaborations, like guest appearances or 2-part episodes. So I guess we are about to test that ourselves, since you are on my podcast and I'm planning to come on yours. But have you already tried this or something similar? And if not, well, do you have any other method to attract new subscribers other than, consistency and maybe differentiate yourself with the with the format as the example you were giving?
I think this in terms of the collaboration and you going to another podcast, I think that will work if the niche are very close to one another.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the niche are not really close, let's say if I'm only talking about engineering, right? And then you're only talking about marketing. My audience doesn't really want to hear about marketing, right? If you come to my podcast, they might start to know more about you, but if they're not really interested in marketing, they won't come and follow you, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I think it makes sense if like these big podcasts, they have a lot of big names, right?
Yeah.
They bring an athlete, a doctor, a celebrity, Oscar winner, right? So this
Right.
way it makes sense. And also, if you again go back to your own patterns of listening to a podcast, you or me mostly listen to a podcast which we have some idea who the guest is.
Yeah.
So,
Or the topic is really super
or
interesting,
the topic is so
and it's a
interesting,
bit
right?
specific, and there's an angle to it I didn't heard before. So but yeah,
Exactly.
that's the two main reasons.
Exactly. Personally, I like listening to Joe Rogan, and I like to listen to him, but maybe I would listen to him once in a month. Why? Because the guest, I would know him. Like Mark Zuckerberg was already on Joe Rogan, so I was just interesting what he has to say. So I
Yeah.
listened to like 30 minutes of it, but the other episodes, I won't really listen, even though I'm sure they're great. So in that term, like the collaboration, I personally haven't really seen something which will like work solid. But every guest that you bring on your episode, there is actually some sort of collaboration happening. So you're providing them the opportunity to speak their thoughts, their framework, their strategy, their company, and everything, right? So it's a great spotlight for them. If you create short clips for them and those short clips go viral, then even better. This is a form of collaboration between the host and the guest. This is the foundation of podcasting, in my opinion.
Right. I love your take on that. And so, how do you, and do you, maybe you don't, try to drive the fact that your guests will also post about your podcast and maybe amplify the reach this way? Do you do, because I know that you are using your podcast content as social media content and repurposing it. But that's interesting if you also try to collaborate with your guests in order for them to amplify that.
Yeah. First of all, I thought in the beginning that everyone is going to be interested in reposting it or engaging with the content. Then, like, I think in the second episode, I understood that that's not the case because they allow us to talk with them for 1 hour or more. But under no circumstances they're obliged to promote the episode to or even say I was on this podcast episode, right? It's nothing we agreed on. But they do that because it's cool and it was a probably like we do a good job enough good job that they're like,
And,
yeah, we were on this podcast, right?
and they
So
pleased to be in the spotlight, maybe to be
exactly.
a bit the hero of the day, you know.
Exactly. So what I try to do is again just thinking it backwards. It's like uh, a lot of these everyone in the tech they like to be invited into conferences, and then they speak at conferences, and then they get the nice pictures from the conference, and then they post on their socials and stuff like that. So if I allow them to have great content, a very high production, great content from the podcast, then I would increase the chance of them reposting, liking, engaging. So that's the thing. Also, maybe from the podcast episode, just taking out some parts which are one interesting, two they would also like.
Yeah.
That will increase the chances. But I personally, me and the team, we don't really, yeah, we are not trying to create a clip which like it will make the guest happy. I'm really here to make the episode more interesting and make the listeners have a great take from the clip or anything. And on the other hand, I always tell the guests that it's very comfortable conversation. So it's if something you said is something that you don't feel it was good to be on the podcast, let me know. I will cut that out. And actually, that never happened. So
Yeah.
uh,
It doesn't.
because I don't ask a gotcha type of question.
Yeah. I guess that also people come a bit prepared on this type of things. So that's interesting that you don't try to drive the content distribution other than quality. I mean, quality is a great
Just
driver,
quality.
and it's probably the main one. But what we also do is we actually agree or try to agree with the guest usually prior to recording the podcast, that will be doing a joint distribution of the podcast, and that we expect the guest to promote his episode as well. Not necessarily the podcast as per se, because that's fine. We understand that he's not here to do our marketing, but if we are to spend time with him and record something, then we expect also him to deliver on distributing it to the relevant people, which is also good for him if and only if the content is good. But we had the same experience as you. We first thought that everyone will be really super happy to just publish everywhere and tell everyone that they will be there soon, and now they're there, and then they were there 2 weeks ago. It was great, but it doesn't happen naturally 100% of the time. So you need to be driving this a bit. Quality
Again,
is a
back
great way to do
to
it.
your question, this might take a year, right? 2 year. I'm sure from 2 year onward, if let's say you and me, we focus on making the podcast better and better and better and better. Next 1 or 2 year, when someone is gonna be on the prod camp or like the product founder, they are gonna post and say, "Hey, I'm gonna be on like product founder
Yeah, when you
podcast."
start to make a name for sure, I mean, you can hope that
Exactly.
this will happen. That's great. So, um, talking about exactly those repurposing content, sharing it on social medias and all, I'm still coming back to this article of Jay, who's really interesting. About if I recall well, he highlighted that there is a real challenge in actually converting social media listeners to podcast listeners. And you said it just right before when you were talking about the shorts on YouTube, or that you listen from many very known podcasts, but you never went to actually listen to the podcast itself. And I guess that you're not even a subscriber maybe of this podcast. So do you see the same thing? And have you found any innovative way to try to bridge this gap and turn this short form content into loyal podcast listeners?
Again, just look at your behavior. Look
Right.
at your
Yeah.
behavior. Look at your ask a couple of your friends how they do it. I think I really like qualitative data, not always quantitative. Like
Mm-hmm.
90% of this, 80% that. Sometimes the metrics doesn't really speak to you. Um, what couple things we try to do. We have like CTAs, which we say if you wanna like listen to the full episode, check our YouTube and Spotify, or like usually the links are in the description. So we allow I would say the person who's looking at the short to have a better entry to the ecosystem of my podcast. But I doubt actually it converts. But from my perspective, this is totally normal. And I have no problem and I won't fight with this. I
Mm-hmm.
am more than happy if the short clips will go viral. And from that, maybe 1 or 2% yeah, will convert to the podcast. It's okay by me. Because what's the end goal for the person, right? So you want you be known in the industry. You have a face. People don't need to like
And a
a
name.
lot of
Yeah. They don't need to
man and name.
subscribe, but to remember your face
Exactly.
and your name.
Exactly. So I'm sure in a long period of time, like people now would see this guy with a turtleneck in front of a mic with a white background. So that's also what I've been doing like since episode 2, like 5 months ago. I'm wearing the same turtleneck. I do watch it, by the way. Yeah, but because it's kind of like your signature, right? It's like you gotta build that signature.
That
So I
brand
remember,
kind of.
yeah, exactly. I remember your hat back there from the first time we spoke, like a
Yeah,
couple
that's my
months back.
signature.
Exactly. So it's uh, you gotta be I would say grateful for that. Even your shorts are going viral and then goes viral, and people on LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube are seeing your face, and it will build up over time. So I don't find. I know you didn't say it's a problem, but I don't find any problem with short clips not converting to long-term podcast listeners.
Okay, great. I love the answer. Um, Emir, I think we're getting close to the end of this episode. I have a couple of questions left though before I
Sure.
let you go.
Sure.
Um, Looking into the future for a sec here, um, and you answered to that kind of sporadically through the episode, but how would you measure your success as a podcast host? You know, and obviously anything beyond just downloads or listens. Uh,
The success of each episode, if you do podcasting, you will notice it in the first month that the success of an episode is basically multiple parameters. How good you will do, how good is the guest. You think the guest is good, but they come on your podcast, and then for some reason you guys maybe are unable to reach what you thought could be the valuable content. Maybe the mood
mhm,
was off that day, maybe your questions were not really hitting the right spot. So, um, or maybe the guest doesn't engage, and then no one from your audience knows that guest, so people really don't listen. So that's
mhm,
the thing. And also, another factor for me as a true success is how good am I gonna become. So it's super challenging. You need to
love
have
that.
discipline. If you think 1 year ahead of time, where you would be. Like I can go back a little bit in time. I was never a person in front of camera. So
Mhm,
I was not afraid of camera or taking pictures. No, never this problem. But I was just not a type of guy who will be in front of camera and start speaking. And then I think it was like 1.5 year ago, 2 years ago, that I was like, I can see more people follow Elon Musk than Tesla, more people follow Tim Cook rather than Apple. So it means the future of brands is personal branding, right? So if I wanna be relevant in the future, one of the best ways to have a personal brand. And where can I start it? Obviously, videos were the easiest one for me because I can talk better than I can write. So
mhm.
I started with
Mm,
like couple clips. I started with
easy
couple
choice.
clips. Yeah, exactly. Just that's what I said. Like try a couple clips. I talked about MVPs and what is
Yeah.
MVP, what is the North Star metrics, all these kind of things, vision, something like that, and slowly started to make sense. And then I think like 8 months later, podcast was born.
Mm,
So for me, this is a huge success. For you, it's important. Like you have to
yeah,
feel
yeah, yeah.
like what you're doing is
For
right
your
and
own
impactful.
evolution. Love it.
Exactly. Exactly. And then over time, a bigger success will also come in terms of like metrics and other things.
Great. One last question, Amira, and I'll let you
You
go.
can
I
ask
promise.
me a couple more if you want.
Great. At least one for now. If, someone, a SaaS founder, content creator, thinking about starting a podcast today, if you had to give maybe only one piece of advice to create a show that truly delivers value and quality, what would it be? One,
I know you
if you
you
can.
asked me. Sure, sure. Um, I would say try to build it as a system. So, what do you need for one episode? How can you get the guest? Once you got the guest, and then you You just recorded everything. What's next? How are you going to make the clips? Who's going to be responsible for making those clips? So I would turn it into like a process, the whole podcasting, because as I said, it's recurring. You're going to do every week from like Monday till next Monday, from this Monday till next Monday. So this process over a period of time, and then you can tweak it. You can remove this part, you can take away that part. So that's going to be my advice. Build the process. One of the maybe the questions you ask, like tips for the people who want to start. Another great tip would be record 10 to 20 episodes first, then start it. Because you record one or two and then you start releasing it and your system is not there. You don't know, you're still testing, you're still figuring out. And then this part of the time that you're doing like research and development to figure out how to use these softwares, it's the same time that you're supposed to record. So you start to get frustrated. So that's what I did.
That's a good one. I'll keep it.
Awesome.
That's a wrap for today's episode, Amir. Thank you for coming in and sharing the lessons you've learned so far from creating a podcast for SaaS founders. I will share below the video the article we were talking about, so people have the reference. You guys enjoy the conversation. Make sure to subscribe to ProdCamp and the Product Founder podcast YouTube channels to get notified about our next episodes. We're planning one when I will be the guest this time of Amir. Also follow us on LinkedIn and share this episode with your network. We'd love to continue the discussion and hear your thoughts. Thanks you for tuning in to Excuse My SaaS. Until next time, keep discovering, keep building, and keep creating value. See you soon. Thanks again, Amir.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. We did it. It was your first guest appearance, no?
Yeah, technically, yes.
Yeah. So how does it feel to be on the other side?
I went on, like, when you say goodbye, I moved the mouse down there. I wanted to like stop the recording.
Stop the recording, yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, it's not mine.
It's not mine, yeah.
Yeah, it was funny.